Welcome to Rogue Reads, which is a monthly show featuring four spectacular blockbuster authors hosted by the Rogue Women Writers, which is a group of 9 thriller writers with backgrounds ranging from intelligence officers, forensic analysts, to cops, to psychotherapists, to journalists. I am very excited to welcome this month's show two guys that are just some of my favorites in the crime fiction community. Two guys who are totally new to me, and I'm very excited to talk with them. And then always one of the most special Rogue Reads because we have one of our own rogues here, Lisa Black. So the way the night is going to go, let me just read our intro. Participants in the Zoom room, you will be in the gallery during the reading, and you can check any questions you have into the chat. We try really hard to get to a Q&A portion of the night. Any comments, anything you want to leave, please do so. And we're also Facebook Live where you can comment, and those comments will be monitored, and we will try to get to every question and comment. All of the books you're going to hear about of it are available tonight through bookstores and Amazon, and buy them, read them, add them to your pile. Some of the best books I've discovered have come through Rogue Reads, and I'm not at all biased. Okay. What we're going to do here tonight is I'm going to introduce each author by kind of going down the line and letting each of them, read their bio, a little bit about their book, and then they'll tell you about their book. Then we'll go into a Q&A portion, and some of our authors may want to read a brief excerpt. I didn't get to talk with all of you beforehand, so I'm just going to completely put you on the spot. But if you decide you do not want to read, if you don't like reading, I have plenty of questions to fill in for the reading portion. And then hopefully by the end of the night, we will get to our audience questions, and I'll tell you about next month's Rogue Reads. So I'm going to start with Kemper Donovan because it's his first mystery, and so exciting to have that happening. So Kemper started out with a company representing film and television screenwriters and comic books, and his very first client wrote the screenplay for the feature film Hannah. He attended Stanford and then Harvard Law, passed the New York bar, and promptly retired from law. While selling his first book, he and his friend Catherine created the podcast All About Agatha, devoted, of course, to Agatha Christie. Tragically, Catherine passed away at the end of 2021. Kemper has continued on with the podcast solo, and it inspired him to begin his own mystery series, now out, published by Kensington. And the book we're talking about tonight is The Busybody. Here's a little brief description, and then Kemper, I'll ask you to share it with the audience. Former Senator Dorothy Gibson, aka That Woman, is the most talked about person in the country, largely for the wrong reasons. She's retreated to her home in rural Maine, inviting her ghostwriter to join her. When a neighbor dies under suspicious circumstances, Dorothy is determined to find the killer in their midst. And when Dorothy Gibson asks if you want to team up for a top secret, possibly dangerous murder investigation, the only answer is, of course. So Kemper, please tell us all about The Busybody.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Can everyone hear me? I'm not muted anymore, am I? Okay, good. I always have that worry when I'm on Zoom. Can anyone hear me? So yes, The Busybody comes directly out of the work that I did on my podcast, All About Agatha, which is, of course, dedicated to Agatha Christie. And I'm so glad that you already mentioned Catherine Brobeck, my former partner. She did pass away 2 years ago. I can't believe it's already been 2 years, and I've been continuing on without her. But it was really the passion that I accessed for mystery with her, which I wouldn't have been able to do on my own, that led to my realization that I had to write a mystery. I had written one book before the podcast, which was more of a suspense, kind of upmarket literary fiction sort of a novel. And looking back, I think I realized that it's like I was trying to write a mystery, but I didn't realize that that's what I needed to write. And Catherine was a big reason why I got there. So the podcast started in September of 2016, and that was just a few months before the 2016 presidential election. That was a big one. A lot of us have presidential elections on the brain again. Don't worry, I'm not going to get political. But I think regardless of political affiliation, most people acknowledge that that was a pretty tumultuous time. That was the Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump face-off. And there was this period directly following the election where people were just sort of wondering what Hillary Clinton was up to. If you remember, this was when there would be those photos of her taking long walks in the woods behind her house. And there was something about it, this just weirdo frozen moment in time that struck me even then as the perfect setting for a murder mystery. I didn't actually go on to write the book until about 4 years after that, but that was really the moment where I had the first germ of an idea. So this character of Dorothy Gibson, who is a senator, is very much inspired by Hillary Clinton, but she's not just a stand-in for Hillary Clinton. I was also inspired by a number of women who broke into politics in the earlier 20th century through a phenomenon known as widow's mandate, which was when a male politician would die and his widow would be called upon to finish out his term until a more suitable, i.e., male replacement could be found.
Huh.
A lot of these women refused to go away, however, and one of the most remarkable instances of widow's mandate is the Senator Margaret Chase Smith. So she was a U.S. representative for many years and then a senator for decades for the great state of Maine. And she first came into national politics anyway because her husband had been a U.S. representative and she was filling his seat, but she stuck around for a long time. And today she's most remembered for delivering this fiery denunciation of McCarthyism on the floor of the Senate. It was called the Declaration of Conscience. It was a big moment. I'm a big fan of hers. I gave Dorothy Gibson the middle name of Chase, and that is one of the primary reasons that the book is set in Maine, which has this sort of spirit of independence. And Dorothy Gibson is an independent candidate, and she's very bipartisan and reaching across the aisle. That kind of a politician, which might seem quaint these days. Um, so that's kind of like the milieu in which the mystery was set. And then I won't talk too long because I know we have a lot of people to get to, but just on my ghostwriter character, who is my first person narrator. So basically, this book is set in the days following the election during that aftermath. When Dorothy Gibson decides, okay, I finally have time to write that personal memoir I've always been meaning to write. So she hires a ghostwriter, and this ghostwriter is our first person narrator of the novel. And if you are wondering what her name is, I'm afraid I cannot tell you because she never has one. She is never named in the novel.
Hmm.
She's a very enigmatic, withholding character, and I was also partially inspired by Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca here, which very famously features an unnamed first
Unnamed.
person female narrator. Yeah, there's just a lot of homages built into Agatha Christie in this book. It's very much a solvable puzzle mystery, which are my favorite kind of mysteries. Not every Agatha Christie is a quote unquote puzzle mystery. There are a lot of different phrases for what that is. I'll just call it a puzzle mystery. But my favorites are, so I wanted to make this something that the reader could solve along with Dorothy and our unnamed ghostwriter character. And yeah, I just had so much fun writing it, and it felt right, like something clicked. I'm not going to say it was easy to write it because it's never, at least for me, easy to write anything, but it felt like I was sort of tapping into the right thing. And it's the first in a series, a 3-book series at minimum. And the other just sort of detail I want to mention before I stop talking is that rather than have my detective sidekick duo travel from book to book as they would in a more traditional work of detective fiction, I'm making this a sidekick series. So basically, we're going to follow the ghostwriter who's going to team up with different detectives in different settings throughout each book. And that's also because I have a lot of affection for the sidekick characters in Christie and in other books. And I kind of like the idea of following one sidekick in these very different worlds. It's just a way of providing a little fresh spin on a very well-worn genre.
Yeah, it's a great twist on that genre. I have tons of questions based on what you've said. I might have to throw out my whole script, but before we move on to the next author, I do just want to say that your joy in describing it sounds like a wonderful homage to Catherine too, and to the joy you guys discovered in mysteries. So
It
that's
is.
wonderful.
I dedicated the book to her as well,
Yeah,
which would come
yeah.
as no surprise. Yeah.
That was really okay. Well, thank you for that intro.
Thank
And we
you.
will be the way we're going to do it is we're going to go down the line. We're going to hear from each of these fantastic authors. Um, John and Jeff, I think I'm going to get to you after Mark because you guys will kind of bounce off each other a little bit. And I'm just going to leave it up to you how you want to plan that. So let's move on to Mark Greaney, who has traveled to dozens of countries to research his novels, as well as visiting the Pentagon, military bases, and many Washington, D.C. intelligence agencies. Mark also trained in the use of firearms, battlefield medicine, and close range combative tactics. His books are published in nearly 24 languages, film exposure, which we might get to a question about that. But here we're now talking about The Chaos Agent, which is Gray Man book number 13. And I'm just going to give a little brief synopsis of it. And then Mark asked you to do exactly what Kemper just did, sort of tell us about it. Someone is killing the world's leading experts on robotics and artificial intelligence. Is it a tech company trying to eliminate the competition or something even more sinister? The Gray Man's quest for a quiet life has led him to Central America, where he and his lover have assumed new identities. With a list of enemies that includes billionaires, terrorists, and governments, they need to keep a low profile. But the world's deadliest assassin can't expect to hide out forever. Mark, tell us about this Gray Man installation.
Okay, I'll try. That bio, I guess, was written by my publisher, and it's a lot better than I can do. I always say I'm the guy that takes 170,000 words to write the thing. So when I have to talk about what it's about, I get kind of flummoxed. But yeah, so it's the 13th book in the Gray Man series. They've been coming out since 2009, and they're all standalone. You don't have to read them all in order. That would be a horrible ask of me. So each book you're oriented and you know who's who and what's what pretty quickly. If you do read them all, there's a longer story arc, but that's not important to enjoy any one of the books. So this book, The Chaos Agent, starts with my hero, Court Gentry, who's the Gray Man. He's a former CIA paramilitary operations officer who now kind of is in the private sector, but he's laying low with his girlfriend, as you said. Her name is Zoya Zakharova. And they are in Guatemala and just basically trying to stay away from the people who are after them. And someone new comes after them. Some unknown force starts targeting them, and they learn pretty quickly that whoever it is targeting them is also going around the world and assassinating the leaders in the worlds of robotics and artificial intelligence. So it becomes this big cat and mouse where they're pursuing the villains are pursuing them. And as we dig into the story, there's a mystery component. But as we unravel a little bit of it, they realize that there's a new lethal autonomous weapon that is about to come online to the highest bidder. And there's dangers of this completely revolutionizing warfare and changing it, just kind of like the Gatling gun revolutionized warfare in the 1800s, or nuclear weapons revolutionized war in the last century. Artificial intelligence is the next thing on the horizon that's going to do the same thing. And so, I got the idea for the book just by seeing people in the news, Elon Musk, people like that, private sector, the power in the private sector now, that artificial intelligence growth is not being driven by the Defense Department or any other government. It's being driven by the private sector. So I had the idea of, well, I mean, there's a potential villain, there's a potential hook. So I began doing research. I read probably 5 or 6 books on artificial intelligence, one of them about 4 times. And then I listened to, I think I figured out probably around 300 hours of podcasts, read countless like think tank papers and government paperwork about AI, lethal autonomous weapons, killer robots, things of that nature. In this book is an espionage novel. It's not science fiction. Everything that's in the book is either existing technology or emerging capabilities. So, it's all very legit, but there's also human beings involved. The story's about humans. It's not about robots. And, at the heart of it, you have a Court, my hero, Zach, his on again, off again sidekick, and Zoya, his on again, off again lover, and all the dangers they're in. So it's a big, it starts in Guatemala, it goes through Mexico, it goes to Cuba. There's other locations as well. It's a big globe-trotting novel, and it's kind of a high-octane action thriller.
No, it's a great description. I have questions for you about setting, which I hope we'll get to, but it's funny what you just said about speculative fiction, because when I was reading about it, I thought it sounded like near future or present future. Like it is. It's happening. It could happen, and we all need to be afraid of it. It seems like from your description.
I'm afraid of it, but again, there's a real bias in being a thriller writer researching something. I was only looking for the dark side, so there's
Yeah.
lots of great things about AI that was
Yeah.
not interesting to me at all for the purposes of
Right.
my story.
Right. All right. Well, thank you for that excellent intro. And let's move to, Lisa, we're gonna host you last because you're one of the rogues, but it's definitely a last but not least kind of situation. So John Land and Jeff Ayers are writing as AJ Landau, and I'm going to introduce you guys separately. But as I said, then you figure out how to sort of bounce the question. So John Land is the USA Today bestselling author of 50 books, including 10 Caitlin Strong series titles. He took over the Murder, She Wrote book series and teamed with author Heather Graham on a new best-selling sci-fi series. John's award-winning nonfiction titles include Betrayal, winner of the 2011 International Book Award in True Crime, Takedown, which won both 2016's USA Best Books Award, and the International Book Award in True Crime. No Surrender and First and Forever each won the American Book Fest Award. John wrote the film Dirty Deeds, a teen comedy with stars that you know of, like, my daughter would, fangirl at Zoe Saldana. Thank you, John, and welcome. Jeff Ayers is a reviewer of thrillers for Library Journal and has written columns on suspense novels, alternative history, and adventure fiction. He's also a freelance writer for the Seattle Post-Intelligencer. Jeff retired from his position as a public research librarian and is currently co-executive director of Thriller Fest for ITW, which is, as to come full circle to where we were chatting about, probably the best conference anybody listening, whether you're an emerging writer, an aspiring writer, a pre-published writer, a writer already, a writer with 50 books like our John Land, get thee to Thriller Fest. Let's talk very briefly. I'm going to introduce Leave No Trace, which is a national parks thriller, and then I'm going to ask John and Jeff to tell me all about it. So in a daring, brutal act of terrorism, an explosion topples the Statue of Liberty. Special Agent Michael Walker of the National Park Service is sent to New York, but finds Gina Delgado of the FBI has been placed in charge of the investigation as the lead of the Joint Terrorism Task Force. As a group led by shadowy figures threatens further attacks, powerful forces within the government are misleading the investigation to further their own radical agenda. John and Jeff, please tell us all about this book.
I have been a fan of the national parks ever since I was a little kid, and love visiting them. And the fact that you can go to a place and see beautiful scenery, learn our history, and it's amazing. And I've always thought, as a reader and reviewer, I've always wanted a book that's set in several national parks, not just one. And the majority of books that you find on the shelf that are fiction about national parks are all one park. And so I came up with this conspiracy idea. It's like, wait a minute, there's a lot of potential here. Let's have some fun with it. And Michael Walker popped into my head. And then as I was thinking this through, I was talking to John about it. And I'll let John take it from there.
Well, of course, what I loved about this idea right from the beginning was the originality of it. The thing about thrillers is trying to find a new take at something that no one's ever done before is virtually impossible. And when you're looking for a new take, you're looking for an audience. You're looking to brand your thriller. So this series was so different. The AJ Landau tag, which is Jeff and I together, is because it's so much different than anything I've ever done before, that it felt better to do it as a debut. And I fell in love with the idea because I immediately see conspiracies and action, and I don't write small things. It's actually over 60 books now. And I never write, I see, especially in my fiction, it all goes back to James Bond, Dr. No, world domination, small plan. And so all my books tend to be about something very, very big. So when Jeff told me about this, all I saw was someone, a radical group, domestic terrorists, for their own ends, are attacking and destroying or trying to destroy Statue of Liberty, Independence Hall, Gateway Arch, parts of Zion National Park. And it goes on from there. Because, and what we settled on was, if you want to take America and break it down and start from scratch, which is what these people do, you start by taking out the symbols that define the country. So that's what we tried to do, but that wasn't enough. What we wanted to do was also create unique heroes, the likes of which were rare. Michael Walker, who Jeff mentioned, is the hero, one of two heroes, and he's missing a foot. He has a prosthetic foot, a disabled hero.
Right.
Very hard in the annals of thriller fiction to find another disabled hero.
Mm.
How he lost his foot becomes a vital element in the book, because as we know in thrillers, we're thriller writers, everything connects. Gina Delgado from the FBI is a demolitions expert. Why? Because things are blowing up.
Mm.
Instead of adding another character, a third character who becomes an expert, we decided to give our second hero, or our first hero, however you want to define it, an expertise that really helped. It's up to Michael and Gina, pretty much by themselves, to stop a conspiracy that will murder 10 million people and change the United States forever.
The face of the United States, like literally almost.
And I should mention,
yeah.
I should mention also that the other thing we wanted to do was create a love letter for the National Park Service and the people who work for them, because they do such an amazing job every day. And we didn't want to disparage the parks in any way at all. And I think we've done that. but I think we did that though.
And yeah, in fact, one of the real fun things about this series, not just the book, because the series is ongoing, is the notion of paying homage to every park that you're setting a scene in.
Yeah.
And Jeff criticized me greatly. We had a pact. Jeff said, I'll only work with you on this book, but you can't have any animals, because it seems like every book I have an animal that becomes a killer. Always an animal that giant thing, giant snake, giant this, giant that, had killer beetles in a book. So I said at one point, Jeff, you're going to hate me. And when he read that scene, basically, Michael, our hero, survives this incredible, survives a fight scene, shoving a rattlesnake down a character's throat. And I said, Jeff, you're going to hate this. Well, he let me have that one animal.
Well, it's a rattlesnake, so yeah.
And that's
so many people love that scene.
So many that scene. But Jeff, what's the other thing in all the advanced reviews they always talk about?
They talk about the fact that each chapter opens with a factoid about the setting of wherever the chapter is located. I always love thrillers where I actually learn something as I'm reading them.
And that goes to your guys' research, which is something I definitely want to get to. But thank you. Thank you for that excellent introduction. I hope everybody is going to pick up the Gray Man series, whether you're starting with 1 or 13. Read the National Parks Thriller series. Get Kemper's debut. And now we will speak with our own Lisa Black, who is also well into a new series. But let me give her bio first. Oh, and we're going to go down the line and do drinks. I'll start with Lisa, because Lisa did give me my most delicious drink of the evening. No shade to all the other authors, but this is a hot chocolate martini. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Lisa Black, Rogue Lisa, is the New York Times bestselling author of 17 suspense novels, including works that have been translated into 6 languages, optioned for film, shortlisted for the inaugural Sue Grafton Memorial Award. Yay. She is also a certified latent print examiner and a certified crime scene analyst, beginning her forensics career at the coroner's office in Cleveland, Ohio, and then the police department in Cape Coral, Florida. She has spoken to readers and writers at numerous conferences, been a consultant on Court TV, and was a guest of honor at 2021 Killer Nashville. Another great conference. Definitely recommend that, especially if you're down. Clay Stafford is a dynamo. So in this third book, in Lisa's. I think of it as a new series. I said in one of my questions, I sort of feel like a proud rogue auntie to this series because I remember its inception. But in The Deepest Kill, software pioneer Martin Post, the third richest man in America, clearly wealth is on people's, extends back to Mark's 13th in the series. Martin Post, the third richest man in America, has summoned expert forensic analysts Ellie Carr and Rachel Davies of the renowned Locard Institute. He believes his daughter's recent death was no accident. Was it a kidnapping gone wrong? Could their new defense initiative for the U.S. military have played a part in her death? Martin believes his spoiled charmer son-in-law is behind the murder, drawing Ellie and Rachel into the Post's increasingly dangerous family dynamic. Lisa, tell us all about this new Ellie and Rachel.
Well, just to give the background to people who haven't read the first two books, which you don't need to enjoy this one. The Locard Institute is a forensic institute. It does 1/3 training for law enforcement and really anyone, forensic personnel, anyone who wants to go. It's 1/3 research, where the scientists on the staff can research their own topics and try and find new forensic techniques, and 1/3 private cases. So this one falls into the private cases, which is really kind of the fun part of, this series, because they get out of Washington, D.C. and get to go on site. So this book I actually set in Naples, which is very close to where I live. It's where Karna lives. And so I could use the kind of fish out of water when I moved here, how different the landscape is in Florida from, say, Cleveland, which is where I'm from. And I described the book as basically the Laci Peterson case if Laci Peterson's father was Bill Gates.
That's good. That's a really good log. Are you stopping there? I mean, you should. That's just a great log line. Yeah. No, that's fantastic.
Pretty much tells you.
Yeah, it does. And that is a fantastic log line. All right. Let's move on down the line. I can see the night moving on quickly already. I'm going to circle back around to Kemper. Dorothy likes a Malbec, but I have his unnamed ghostwriter's cup of coffee here because that's what I would be able to use a little bit more tonight. So Kemper, you talked about this a little bit when you said that it's a puzzle mystery that the reader could presumably figure out. And I know we have a lot of mystery fans in the audience every week, so I think that's going to real appeal to people. But my question for you is sort of about the who and the done it, and whether you know that at the outset and sort of where you fall on that plotting versus pantsing, creation of the puzzle mystery that people have a chance to figure out. Are you one step ahead of the reader? How are you doing that? How do the mechanics work for you?
Yeah. So the process was very different when I was writing this mystery from that first novel that I wrote, which really was more straightforward and certainly like linear. The narrative was linear. And I felt that I needed to outline it. And I've already actually written the second one in the series as well. And I think I've even honed the process more in that one. I kind of outlined even more, even more thoroughly, I think. And the reason I did is that I was a little scared to outline because I think I was worried that it was going to suck the creative juices out of the process. But to my surprise and delight, it actually did the opposite. I mean, once I sort of had the scaffolding in place, I felt like then I was able to tinker with, the text and do all the sort of writerly things that I love to do. And it kind of gave me freedom and also freedom to depart from the outline as well. So even, the scaffolding never fell apart, if I'm going to extend that metaphor a little bit, but I was able to move some things around. And if things weren't working, kind of go in different directions. And it ended up being a very creatively fulfilling process. And that had been a big worry of mine because I at least didn't feel like I could go into writing a puzzle mystery without having figured out all of the major pieces ahead of time. That was too much jumping into the abyss for me. I'm sure there are some that do that, but I did not have that courage or foolhardiness.
Yeah, no, I think it is, because what if you get there and there is no who to the done it or just a But you said you honed it and you finished the second already. Congratulations. But what do you mean? How did you hone that sort of dialogue with yourself about the story in the second book?
So I actually on the podcast, I know there are a couple of people who are tuning in who are podcast listeners, and on the podcast, Catherine and I eventually came up with this breakdown structure where it wasn't anything revolutionary, but we would start with a victim, then a cast of suspects, and then the best thing that we did structurally is that we would start with the world as it appears to be, and then have a bridge of clues that take you into the world as it actually is, which is kind of the deductive process that's happening in a traditional work of detective fiction a la Agatha Christie. So for the second book, I actually did that puzzle breakdown for my book completely. And then I also did a plot breakdown, which was just chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, your sort of usual linear kind of thing. So I did two very detailed and long outlines, which I now, which I then used in concert with each other while I was actually writing the book. And I found that that was very helpful.
Oh, that was amazing. All right. I wonder if some questions will turn up about this plotting and outlining aspect, because it's always, conferences, we
I
rail
get it.
about this
Yeah.
and we debate. Very interesting. Thank you. Okay,
Thank you.
Mark. Yeah, I thought Mark was the Irish. It's a tiny amount. That's because I really like smelling whiskey, but if I took a sip of this, I would not be able to. I'd be slurring my words even more. So, Mark, you touched on this a little bit. The setting, you kind of setting hop to different locales. There's a lot of research that comes into these books, not just the 13th installation. And I would just love to hear about, your process of doing that kind of research, whether it applies to setting or AI that's going to be here on the horizon is already here. Like, how do you do it? How do you talk to people? You said you read some actual primary sources. Give the writers and the readers in the audience sort of a look into your process day to day as you're creating a new book.
Yeah, people always ask me if I'm a pantser or a plotter, and I'm somewhere in between. I wish I was a better plotter. I write out a kind of a lousy outline, but it's before I've done any of the research, so I really don't know what I'm doing, and I just come up with ideas and put them down and try and make it look like it's some sort of it's a little story about the story. And then that goes to my editor and he looks at it and he calls me up and he asks me a bunch of questions about it that I can't answer because I'm, just basically riffing at this point. And then I just start doing the reading and I always plan where I want to go for the story pretty early on. I just got back from West Africa for another story I did, and it'll come out in June. And then, for this one, I went to Guatemala and Mexico. Part of it takes place in Cuba, and I wasn't able to go to Cuba. I just didn't have time in my schedule to go. So, there's times you have to just kind of wing it, and you don't have to go to the locations. I think it makes my stories richer and it helps me as a writer come up with ideas and learning the atmospherics of the locations. But there have been, during COVID, I wrote a book about India and a book about Germany. I used to live in Germany, so that was pretty easy. India was like the second year of COVID, which I thought everything would be fine then, so I went ahead and planned it in a place I've never been. Once I was doing a book about Vietnam and had the trip planned and everything, and then found out I had to get ankle surgery. So I wrote the whole book from my couch, basically with my foot elevated. So you don't have to go to the places if you're willing to do the research to learn as much as you can. And as far as the AI aspect of the story, I wanted to keep the story really grounded and not, sci-fi. So I basically told myself I would only put things in there. I could definitely use artistic license to kind of weaponize some AI technology that maybe isn't being weaponized, or if it is, we don't know about it. But I read a lot into the ethics of lethal autonomous weapons and robotics, and a lot into obviously the nuts and bolts of where we are development wise. And everything that I read just made it more and more interesting to me and made me want to read more and more. And it's with these books, I write 2 books most years, or I've written 25 books in 15 years. And you always learn as much as you can in the time you have, and then you move on to something else. invariably the book will come out a year later, and a bunch of experts on the field will email you and want to talk to you about it and everything. And I'm like, yeah, sorry, I've moved on to something else because the train keeps moving. But yeah, I just did a lot of reading, and I didn't want to put anything in the story that didn't make the story intriguing or better. So, I think everybody here has done a bunch of research before and then realized, oh, this really doesn't add to the story, but I did all this work. And early in my career, I would try and force that in there because, I felt good about having done the research. But now it's all about making the story just fast paced.
Well, it's like the tip of the iceberg, right? And the tip gets in there, and then the
Yeah.
rest is, but it forms a shadow. I mean, I think like the authority with which the series goes, you can feel that there even.
Yeah, hopefully so. Yeah.
Well, thank you. That is fascinating. So, John and Jeff, I mean, okay, wait, let me look at what I did. Oh, I know what I did. I did Vodka Rocks for the National Park series, but I'm going to tell you guys all a little secret. Can you see this? It's kind of blurry to me. There's no
Yeah.
way this is vodka. This is my glass of water, but I'm just pretending. I mean, if I drank this much vodka.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
We believe that.
Yeah. It's a little bit like I once ran into my mother-in-law at the liquor store, and I was buying this big bottle of vodka, and she was like, oh, and I was like, no, I'm going home to make penny vodka tonight. And I really was, but anyway, I digress. John and Jeff, there are so many questions. Let me just take a look at the time because I know we're not gonna, oh my goodness. I really want to know what your guys' day-to-day, and I know our audience does, what your day-to-day process, because this is a collaboration, and John, over 60 books, obviously you've got it down to a science, but now here are you and Jeff collaborating and on a book, two characters. And I know I heard you guys kind of go back and forth, like, is it Michael? Is it Gina? Like, who comes first? How did you decide things like that? And how did you create this, not just the story, because you touched on the research, but the character creation, and creatively, how did this work as a collaboration?
You want to start, John?
No, you start, Jeff.
Well, essentially what we do is we hop on Zoom together and we coordinate the plot for about 50 pages or so. And then we go off, and John is one of the fastest writers I've ever seen. He can churn out thousands of words a day. I don't know how he does it. So he'll do a first draft, and then he'll send it to me, and then I will edit and also add in all the research details, because I'm the guy who has been doing the primary research.
Oh my gosh, this is fascinating.
Yeah.
I would never have guessed.
We were talking about Pantser versus, I think Kemper said he's done 2 outlines for one book. That's 2 more than I've ever done and ever will do.
Yeah.
Because to me, if I surprise myself, if I write organically from the inside out, not the outside in, if I don't know what's going to happen next, the reader can't possibly know what's going to happen next. It's not rocket science. So I love surprising myself, number one. Number two, I love getting to a point where I go, okay, this is all right, but there's not enough here. It's kind of like I used to, when I started off my career just blowing everything up, when a book started to drag a little bit, my rule was just blow shit up. Now it's a little more subtle than that. I'm still blowing a lot of shit up. Obviously, Leave No Trace blows everything up, including the whole country nearly. But what I find that's so much fun is when you're writing a book from the inside out, you're also the first person reading it. You're evaluating it as a fan. So the most important things about a collaboration are not the actual writing process. Everybody does that their own way. It's the planning. It's the thinking out loud. I'll call Jeff and say, you're going to hate me. I've got a new idea. I want to shift something radically. For example, in book 2, where we are now, second book in the series is called Cold Burn, which is a nice title to follow up Leave No Trace. The original intention was Gina was going to be in one part of the country. Michael was going to be in another part of the country. But I realized in the organic process of the writing, Gina couldn't stay there the whole time. She had to go somewhere else, which puts her in the same general area that Michael is. Just because there's something else that happens, an entirely another thing, because there are so many things. I love thrillers where there's an awful lot going on. I grew up on Robert Ludlum, Stephen King, who writes horror thrillers, but Firestarter, The Dead. I mean, there were a lot of thriller elements to Stephen King's work.
Oh, yeah.
David Morrell. Those four authors that when I was in college, I read, made me want to be a thriller writer.
Wait, who was the fourth before David, John?
Clive Cussler in his prime.
Yeah.
Raise the Titanic. Lots going on. The past connecting with the present. Motivation. So the most important thing in the writing a book is that you have to have fun doing it. Because if you're not having fun writing it, the reader is not going to have fun reading it.
So
I would agree with you 100%. Yep.
Jeff, yeah. So when you say the outline, two more than you've ever written, it's partially because you're moving those pieces around just before the next move is played. Right? Like you're in midair and you're building the plane is a better analogy.
What's that like to work with, Jeff?
He tries to surprise me and never does. Just for the record.
That's
true. But no, one of the things that I feel like I bring to the table with this collaboration is I can see the overall arc and make sure it all fits together. So essentially, we're getting boxes with the pieces, and we don't know what the picture's going to turn up. But by the time it's done, the puzzle's complete and we have the full picture.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you guys are a great pair because you really bring different things to the table. So Lisa, and then everybody start thinking about whether they want to read an excerpt because that's what we're going to do next. But Lisa, of all the questions I was sort of thinking, I find that the one I really want to ask you is you do relationships and the emotional level very, very well. I've noticed it in much of your work. And I'd like to know if that's an intentional, like in this, the description actually has like dysfunctional family dynamics right there. I'd like to know if that's sort of like more relational level is an intentional part of your writing. Does it just seep out because that's the kind of, person you are? And can you talk about that level to the new, to the deepest kill? The emotional, the dynamic, the family level.
Wow, that is the hardest thing for me. The whole writing emotions does not come naturally to me at all. If I had my way, I'd be writing like Ellery Queen, where nobody had any emotions. You just had a puzzle and the detective wanted to solve it because that's just what he likes to do. And I would be perfectly okay with writing those kind of mysteries. So I only put in emotion and relationships because I have to. And so perhaps it comes out subtle because it's as minimal as I can feel I can get away with. And I can, when I'm writing, it's like I'm watching a movie. I can see it in my head. I can see the scene playing out in front of me. So I can see all the little physical, hesitations and, when you get the feeling, when you're in a room with two people and you get the feeling that they're not really getting along, you don't know why, but you pick up on that. So I can see all that in my head. And I try to give the reader the same little, nonverbal clues that I would feel if I was a real person standing there.
See, but that's why I think it is so emotional because you're giving the tells. I mean, we don't get emotion in fiction from being like, and she was sad. Like you're saying you're seeing it and so we feel it because you're conveying what they're actually doing.
That's what I'm going for. So I'm glad if it's working.
All right, let's go right down the line. And if you do not want to read, I am going to just ask you another question. And it's going to be the same question for all authors, by the way. But if you do want to read, our audience loves it. We would welcome just a brief excerpt. It does not have to be very long at all. Kemper, do you feel like reading with us tonight?
Sure. Yeah, I'm happy to read.
Great.
All right, I'm just going to read from the very beginning, since I rather than have to set up context, and this is a short little opening here. So here we go. I tell other people's stories for a living. You can call me a ghostwriter, though usually I just say I freelance, which is vague and boring enough to put an end to strangers' polite inquiries. Among friends, I call myself a Lady Cyrano, which is meant to be self-deprecating. I have an unusually large nose. That's a lie, actually. Not about my unusually large nose, but about my supposed friends. I have lots of acquaintances and colleagues and associates, an assortment of people who pepper my existence so that if you saw me from the outside, you'd think my life was perfectly full. There are times it seems full even to me. But the truth is, I don't have any friends. Not the kind I always pictured having. Friends so close, they're family. Oh, I don't have a family either. We decided years ago it would be best if we stopped talking. I'm not telling you this to make you feel sorry for me. I'm telling you because I have to be honest. It's the only way this is going to work. Ghostwriting is not about honesty. It's about strategy. A good ghostwriter will manipulate a story for purposes of maximum engagement, and I am a very good ghostwriter. My specialty is memoir. I tell the inspirational life stories of outrageously successful people, actors, athletes, politicians, assholes, in other words. Though I guess that's just one word. I make the assholes likable and interesting. Like a sculptor, I carve out something beautiful from the rough-hewn block of their existence and then polish it till it sparkles. You may think of me as a professional bullshit artist, but I love what I do. Ghostwriting's been around since there were stories to tell. I've always been a snoop where other people are concerned, and I discovered in my late 20s I have a knack for spinning tales about them and for making these tales sing. But I refuse to strategize or manipulate here. This isn't about some celebrity overcoming the odds, and there's no need for me to sell you anything. Because somehow, I managed to get myself wrapped up in an honest-to-goodness murder mystery. And for once, the story's all mine.
That's good. Good wrap-up line. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you.
Kemper. Mark, would you like to read from the Chaos Agent?
I'm not going to. I spent about 45 minutes before this call trying to find a snippet with a beginning, a middle, and an end that was like 3 minutes long, and my stuff's just a little too long-winded. I've found out.
It's okay. You don't have to. That's fine. I was very torn between, our audience loves readings, but they also love the information and the inside peek. So the question that I guess I will ask, I think I'm going to leave that for all the No, I'm going to ask you. Okay, what is it like to be up to book 13 of a long-running series, and how do you feel things have evolved? I mean, you touched on this a little bit from book 1, where you said, you really tried to get in all the research. Obviously, you've matured and the series has matured. But what is it like for you to be writing a long-running series, and ways in which you keep it fresh and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, good question. For me, I just never want to be that person that is like phoning in or resting on their laurels. So every book has to be different in some way. And a lot of times it's mechanical ways that I did one book in first person, things like that. But I also like to, investigate other things. I like to go to other places. I like to train in scuba diving or whatever else. I got to fly in the back of an F-18 doing research for a book. So that keeps it fresh. I mean, really, you learn pretty quickly. I used to think when I was a reader before I was a published author that a lot of authors write 2 or 3 good books and then they just get lazy. And now I go, oh, okay, that's not really what's happening. It's like you tell all the stories and then it's just a question of whether or not you can go out and find new stuff and learn new stuff. So I'm always trying to expand my horizons so I don't write the second book again. I wrote 7 books, either with or for the Tom Clancy estate, 3 with Tom and 4 after. And, I told my editor after the 7th one, I'm like, you've got to find somebody else to keep this fresh because, I can only follow a guy down a street so many times in so many different ways. Or yeah, I said, when it gets to the point where I'm writing my second knife fight in a hot tub, you've gone too far, with the storylines. I don't really have that with the Gray Man because I do like kind of expanding the characters' maturity as time goes on and his worldview. And his worldview is very similar to mine. He and I are very much the same, except he's really good at stuff, and I can talk about stuff. It's a pretty important distinction, but it is true. But yeah, that's me in a nutshell. Is like 13 books into the series, I panic about it staying fresh and staying interesting to readers. So each year is this new kind of quest for something I haven't done before.
Well, I guess if the world keeps being frightening, you'll always have a new book to
Seems
write.
like it. Seems like it. Yeah.
Thank you. That's a great. So do you find that ideas are coming to you because you're whatever you've gone to, not Cuba, but maybe you'll get there the next time, and then the next idea is sort of shaping and taking shape, or do you find that you follow the idea to different places and subjects?
I follow the idea. I mean, well, actually, there's a couple of times I did a book called Deadeye, which took place in Stockholm, Sweden during a blizzard. And I wrote that book because I saw the movie The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and was like, I want to go to Sweden and I want to write it off. Can I come up with a good story? So that has happened very artificially, but usually I will go where I feel like the story is leading me.
Right. Well, and that keeps it fresh. So great. Thank you. John, Jeff, between the two of you, would one of you like to read an excerpt from Leave No Trace or
We have, I'll wait till we're not there yet.
Yeah.
There we are.
So the idea is I'm going to read the dedication and then John's going to ask you to do something.
yeah? Okay.
So the dedication. To the exceptional individuals who make up the National Park Service, your dedication and service to ensure the history and preservation of the over 400 parks, monuments, and historic sites does not vanish from the earth is appreciated more than words can express.
Mm.
And I believe that the definition of a great thriller is you can open to any page, just like if you're watching a great movie. Any scene you start watching will hook you. In a great thriller, any page you open to at random will make you want to know what happened before and what's coming next. There are no exceptions. So, Jenny, what is your favorite number?
I'm gonna say 145.
Oh my God, let's go to 145. I'm not going to read the whole page because I know we're running low on time, but let's just see how well you did.
Yeah.
And like the magicians, you did not know this was going to happen. All right. Oh, page 145 is only a half page. Green Park Rangers were making a final sweep when the bomb blew, Chief Delgado. Potentially only them. Gina heard the hum of helicopters approaching. That's how we're going to evacuate the observation deck, Jarvis repeated as the National Guard choppers came into view. Precarious, but our only choice. The fire department doesn't have a ladder truck that can reach high enough, and we're short on hang gliders. The noise of the helicopters almost prevented Gina from hearing her phone ring. Rod Rust, her boss, lighting up in the caller ID. I need to take this, she told Jarvis. It's your counterpart from New York. Tell Rod I said hi and to take better care of his back. Already told him that myself, Gina said, stepping away to answer. I'm on the ground, boss. We've got a problem, Rust told her. How'd we do?
Well, I gotta say, I mean, if you had it read like an encapsulated bit that you could have planned to read in advance because it would take you
from this book.
No, that's pretty interesting because really we did not plan it beforehand, and it reads like you could have rehearsed that excerpt.
Where people said, no, that was canned. Someone pick another number, but there's other people who have to go. So,
well, yeah.
No, it really wasn't. No, that's very interesting. I don't think that would work. I don't think that would work in everybody's work, but I can see why this series, maybe it's all of your work, John, but John, I say, as opposed to the two of you, but this.
Yeah, I grew
we
up.
called this Die Hard of the National Parks.
I picked 45. Can I pick a number? Can you read just a little from page 45?
Is that random?
Yes, that's random.
I'm gonna read the first two lines because I don't want to take up any more
just
time.
a couple, yeah.
I will read just a couple lines from 45. And I will say the way I fell in love with this idea was I discovered so many authors as a mass market paperback writer for my 14 books. I discovered Lee Child this way. I discovered Burke this way. Blocks of room had been reserved across several hotels closest to the Battery Park Ferry Terminal for first responders who'd be returning to Liberty Island after grabbing a few hours of sleep, since the threat of an imminent attack turned out to be not credible. Michael had been booked into a Hampton Inn just a quarter mile from the terminal. He could feel how tired he was in the elevator, leaning up against the cab wall and actually feeling his eyes close involuntarily. His room was located near the end of the hall from the 5th floor, and Michael realized he should have asked for one closer to the elevator. His overtaxed leg felt like it was on fire. State-of-the-art prosthetic or not, there was only so much stress any leg attached to a fake foot could take.
Good last line. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very interesting, guys. It's a good parlor trick. I think you should try it at Thriller Fest for sure. Lisa, will you read to us from Ellie and Rachel number 3?
Certainly. Okay. This is a little bit into chapter 2, and I should explain that Rachel is a former pathologist, a former medical examiner, and Ellie is a crime scene specialist. So that's why they're there. But they're meeting the 3rd richest man in the world for the first time. Nature dominated the view so fully that Ellie almost missed the slender, quiet man standing to the side of it. He came forward and, as his wife had, held out a hand. Dr. Davies, Dr. Carr? He shook Rachel's hand and turned to Ellie, who banged a shin into the sharp corner of the coffee table as she reached him. She had to stifle a grimace while saying, "I'm so pleased to meet you." Then she remembered why they were meeting. "I'm sorry it's under these circumstances." "Me too," he said simply. The man looked exhausted. Dark hair flecked with gray hung in neglected clumps, and his thin face seemed all the thinner, its lines elongated by grief. Shoulders sagged under a heavy t-shirt and the sinewy arms twitched. His lips were dry and cracked from the dehydration common to fatigue. Though Ellie had never had a child to lose, she knew grief. But she'd known it at an early age with limited comprehension. Martin Post now knew it in all its myriad multi-level implications, and it might devour him whole. "Please sit down," Danny said to them, gently handling the social niceties that he could not. But Martin Post didn't have time for niceties and didn't pretend to. He visibly shook off the fog and spoke. "Thank you for coming. I realize it's short notice, but time is short. The medical examiner's office is about to release my daughter's body. They've ruled her death accidental." "Yes," Rachel said. "My son-in-law will have custody since he's technically next of kin." "Yes." "I need you to examine her body." He took a deep breath, steeling himself to say the next words, the stuff of every parent's most crushing nightmare. "I need you to examine every factor in her life. I don't believe my daughter died in an accident. I believe she was murdered."
You say about emotion and how do you do it, but think about that grief devouring him whole. Like that's how the emotion comes through in those indirect tells. Thanks, Lisa. Thank you, all our authors. Chris, I think we have time for maybe a question or two from the chat.
We have a couple of questions. One, and I'll bring everyone up, but they want to know, Deborah Pruce wants to know, do you ever go down the rabbit hole with research? When you start doing research, do you ever, get lost in it to the point where it maybe is going to be detrimental to your work? Or
let's go right down the line in the order that we did. So Kemper and then Mark and then John and Jeff and then Lisa.
I try not to get lost in it. I definitely have, because all of these mysteries are based in, at least in part, on something taken from real life. So there are those days where I get lost in it and you blink and realize, oh, wow, I've just been reading about X random thing for like 90 minutes. But I try to curtail that. It's very easy to fall into that trap.
I fall into that trap a lot. I'm a notorious time waster. I'm a prolific writer, but I also waste a lot of time, which means I don't do much else other than sit at my laptop. And I will be researching something and just keep digging and keep getting deeper into it. And then, more than I need or deeper than I need. I also, the way my mind works, and maybe others of you are like this too. I'll be sitting there working on something and I'll be like, hey, what year did Don Knotts die or something? And, just you get sucked into Google and Wikipedia and all that. And, it's just like these most random things. I wonder if there's a video of Led Zeppelin's concert in, Mexico in 1974. And then I just go down the rabbit hole. Has nothing to do with my work, but it's just kind of how my brain works. It's very sort of stream of consciousness. And, yeah, it's a fight to stay disciplined, to only do the research you need.
John, Jeff?
I fall in the rabbit hole too. And what'll happen is I'll listen on Spotify music, and sometimes I go, wait, who's that? Oh, wait a minute. I thought that group broke up like 5 years ago or something. So then I'll look them up. But yeah, for me, in my opinion, research, you have to do more than the usual to make sure you get all the stuff right. And then just make sure you don't overuse it on the page.
John,
I
anything to
live
add?
by the great quote from Robert Louis Stevenson. It doesn't matter to me if you believe what I'm writing is true. All that matters to me is that you do not disbelieve it. That's where the phrase suspension of disbelief originated. So I will never be a prisoner of my research. I'm a voracious Google I've mastered Google. I can find, as far as that goes. But I will, I've done books where I didn't know what the MacGuffin was when I started the book. I just knew it was going to kill a lot of people, but I didn't know how. So what I do is, instead of going to experts and saying, tell me how to do this, I say, this is what I've done. Tell me how to make it credible. And Leave No Trace is a perfect example of that, because what you have is a weapon, which is sort of a bioweapon. I won't go into the details, but it can kill 10 million people in the bad guy's hands. 10 million Americans are going to die. How credible is the technology behind this? It's believable. And that's all it has to be, because one thing about thrillers, the hero almost always wins. So the bad thing never happens. So why slave over, well, we can't put this in the book because it would never happen that way. Well, it's not going to happen anyway. So don't be a prisoner. If you're writers out there, don't be a prisoner of your research. Figure out what to do. I also learned from a writer named Garson Kanin that he used to write a lot of books, and he used to say, I do the research after I write the book. Write the book, then now that's exaggerating if you're a thriller author, but no, I'm not a prisoner of my research. And if I want to do something, I'm going to find a way to make it work.
I actually think it's not a bad principle, because then your imagination can totally fly. Then you go back and you do the research, and where you got it wrong, you rein it in. But this is very interesting, because in some ways I think we have very polar opposites in our lineup. But Lisa, your answer to the research, I mean, I would think some of it ties into your background professionally.
That's different, yes.
Yeah, and some things I just know from working on the job, I don't have to research, but I love research. I could happily just research forever and never actually write the book sometimes. And I'll use just any resource that might help. Like for The Deepest Kill, one of the first things I did was took Karna out to lunch down in Naples and said, I'll buy you lunch if you let me pick your brains. And about defense contractors and how they do a demonstration when they have a new product they want to pitch to the government. So that was interesting. Podcasts, there's actually an entire podcast on how government defense contracting, if you want to do this. But you have to do kind of overkill with research, because so much of it is not what you need. So so I watch YouTube videos. I, watch documentaries, hit every documentary on Amazon Prime. Of course, the library is the first place I start. I love audiobooks and anything that's remotely like the topic. So you do wind up doing a whole lot of research, and I love all of it. So I do have to kind of rein myself in at some point.
So the follow-up question that came on just at that point was, how many of you are on the FBI watch list for the research you're doing? Or do you know?
They're in incognito mode when they do their research.
it's the surest example that nobody is actually reading our web browser history, because over the years I've looked up, how to cook crystal meth, how to mix up plastic explosives in your garage. Decapitation is a form of murder, and and nobody's ever knocked on my door yet. So,
or steered clear of you, like in the supermarket, like she's the one that they said. Well, I
can neither confirm or deny that I am on the FBI watch list.
Well, if any one of you disappears and we don't get a next great book from you, we will know to go looking in official channels or something. I cannot say thank you enough to these great authors. I hope everybody will get The Busybody by Kemper Donovan, John and Jeff's new National Parks thriller, Leave No Trace, Lisa Black's third in her series, The Deepest Kill, Mark Greeney's The 13th Gray Man, The Chaos Agent. I hope I haven't flubbed anybody's titles. Thank you to all the authors for sharing their insights and their work and being here tonight. I hope that our audience will get each of these books and have a great month of reading until our March Rogue Reads, when we will be featuring Greg Hurwitz, Amanda Flower, Nick Petrie, and another Rogue, Isabella Maldonado. And thank you very much, Rogue Lisa, for joining us, and Chris for all the tech. I hope you guys have a great month of reading ahead, and I hope the writers don't go down any research rabbit holes. And John, I'll look forward to page 12 in the next one.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you
Thanks
so
a lot,
much.
y'all.
This was a pleasure.
A pleasure. Thank you.
Take care.
Good night, everybody. Thanks for joining
night.
Rogue Reads.